Welcome to the deep dive. Bitcoin just put on an absolutely stunning show. We saw it dip to around $98,240 on June 22nd, and then boom, over $106,000 just a day later. Now, our sources suggest this wasn't just random. It looks like a really fascinating mix of forces lining up just right. So today, we're going to unpack that for you using the material you shared.
Exactly. And what's really interesting here is, like you said, it wasn't one single thing. It was this confluence, this powerful coming together of different elements, each one kind of feeding the others.
Okay, so let's dive in, though. What was the sort of immediate spark? What really kicked off this big upward move?
Well, the most immediate trigger seems to be the geopolitical situation easing up, specifically in the Middle East. On June 24th, U.S. President Trump announced Israel and Iran had agreed to a ceasefire. And that was pretty critical.
Oh, right, because that earlier conflict, the 12-day war, that had pushed Bitcoin down, hadn't it? Below $100 K.
Precisely. So that ceasefire announcement, it immediately boosted risk appetite globally, and Bitcoin just shot up.
It's fascinating, though. Bitcoin acting like a risk-on asset here.
Yeah.
Often we hear digital gold, safe haven. How does this fit? Does it mean its role is maybe more complicated?
That's a great point. And yeah, I think it does show complexity. The speed and the sheer amount of money that flowed back in suggests maybe a new level of trust. Or perhaps it's acting more like a quick barometer for global risk sentiment in these moments.
Okay.
It really showed there was significant capital just sitting there waiting for things to cool down geopolitically.
Right, waiting for that uncertainty to lift. And then, once it did, another big factor was already in play, wasn't it? The U.S. spot Bitcoin ETFs. How much weight do they carry?
Oh, they've been huge. Absolutely massive. Since they launched back on January 11th, 2024, we're talking, $49.9 billion in cumulative inflows?
Wow.
And just on June 24th alone, another $350.6 million came in. That marked 10 straight days of inflows.
10 days straight.
Yeah. It really points to a more structural demand from institutions. It's not just quick trades anymore. It looks like they're actually building long-term positions, making Bitcoin a real part of their portfolios.
And digging into our sources, something else stood out, which I found really interesting. Corporations, actual companies putting Bitcoin on their balance sheets. What's happening there?
Yeah, that's another layer. We're seeing, I'd say, deeper corporate conviction.
Yeah.
Like Strategy, formerly MicroStrategy, they just bought another 245 BTC last week, about $26 million worth.
Okay.
And maybe even more significantly, Japan's Metaplanet added another 1,111 BTC, roughly $118 million, just on June 23rd. That brings their total stash to 11,111 BTC. They bought them at an average price around $95,869.
So what's the message there? Why is this important?
Well, it signals they see Bitcoin as a strategic long-term asset, not just speculation. And that could create a kind of signaling effect for other companies, especially when you see reports like Metaplanet having a, 306.7% YTD 2025 yield mentioned. That definitely gets attention in corporate finance departments.
You bet it does. Okay, so we've got geopolitics coming down, strong institutional ETF flows, corporate buying. What about the technicals? Do the charts back this up?
They absolutely do. Yeah, looking at the BTC USD daily chart, there's a pretty classic pattern forming since late January. It's called a cup and handle.
Cup and handle, right. Bullish pattern.
It's typically very bullish, yes. Think of a U-shaped the cup followed by a smaller downward drift, the handle. Bitcoin's currently trading in that handle part. It's eyeing a break above the $105,000 resistance. If it clears the all-time high, around $112,000, the technical target from this pattern could actually be up near $144,000.
Wow, 144K. That's potentially a 37% jump from here.
That's the technical projection, yeah.
Yeah.
So these patterns, they sort of reinforce the positive feeling from the fundamental news.
Creating a kind of positive feedback loop then. Fundamentals push price. Price confirms technicals. Technicals attract more buyers.
Exactly right. It builds on itself, attracts the technically focused traders, and can really accelerate things. So it's so fascinating seeing how all these different pieces, the geopolitics, the huge ETF inflows, companies buying it up, and these confirming chart patterns, how they all just synergize. They link together.
It really does paint a picture of Bitcoin maturing, doesn't it? Becoming more accepted as, a real asset class on the global stage. So what does this all mean for you listening in? Well, this deep dive really shows Bitcoin's latest rally isn't some random spike. It's grounded in a powerful mix of interconnected factors pushing it forward.
And that brings up a really interesting question to think about. With Bitcoin showing the sensitivity to global events, but also getting woven deeper into institutional and corporate plans, what does that say about its future role? And, what might be the next big test or maybe the next big catalyst on its journey?